Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here. I'll be presenting today on a wooden carving that I made of the Mississippi River, and I can pass it around so you can look at it while I'm talking. It's not fragile or anything, but Zach, if you want to grab it. So I love cartography for the same reasons that I love woodworking. Not only is it an awesome creative outlet, but it also allows me to connect with people and with the environment in a way that I think is pretty unique and meaningful. And I got into GIS first, as you heard, by doing a lot of different field-based positions, and I was really excited about gaining a skill set that would allow me to share what I was passionate about in science with other people in a way that was more approachable and could reach a wider audience. And I kind of fell into woodworking in the same way through that field work. At the time, I was living on a remote wilderness ranch, and there wasn't a whole lot to do there, but all the materials for woodworking were available, so I just sort of started doing it and making trinkets and gifts for family and friends. But what I found that I really loved was creating things that would help to build community, so like board games and things that we could use around the camp, like cutting boards or a knife block, and stuff like that would allow the building of community, but also creativity. And so when NACIS was coming around, I was really excited about the opportunity to mesh these two interests in a unique project. So the idea for carving the river itself came from the piece of wood that I had, which I'll talk about in a minute, but also from my own history. Until very recently, I've never lived in a community that wasn't directly on or very nearby the Mississippi River. And my parents are the same way. So my mom grew up really close to the headwaters in northern Minnesota. My dad a little further south in Dubuque, Iowa. And we lived right in between in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I stayed on theme for college and moved upstream to St. Joseph, Minnesota. And then after graduating, down to St. Louis, Missouri. And most recently to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where even in a big city like Minneapolis, the river's presence is so tangible and so noted, even in the middle of the city. It's where all of the drinking water comes from for the city, and I went on runs almost every day along the banks, so the river has always felt very much a part of my life. And so when my uncle gifted me a piece of wood from his own yard, which is on the Mississippi River, that he hand-milled himself, I really wanted to do something special with it. And the opportunity felt perfect when I accepted a job to move for the first time permanently outside the Mississippi watershed to Atlanta, Georgia. And it felt like the perfect opportunity to create something beautiful that meant something to me in the likeness of something that I think is so great. So for me, this project is twofold. I wanted to create the carving, but I also wanted to explore other methods of creative map making and illustrating cartography. And so I also wanted to create a map of native common tree species that take place along the Mississippi River. So for the data for the illustrated map, I just downloaded individual point layers of specific tree species from the National Forest Service. And then I just digitized the general areas where each of those species was densest. And I imported my own symbology that I drew in Procreate in order to make the final map, and I did the clusters for the actual symbology, and then the individual leaves and their respective nuts or seeds as the legend. And I'll be the first to admit this is not a perfect map, and there's a lot that I would change. In the future, I would love to explore more methods of digital art, as well as troubleshooting some of the technical issues that I came up with like the harder lines of the polygon boundaries. I was frustrated with how the leaves got cut off, and so I'd love to find more ways to troubleshoot the roadblocks like that in the future. As far as the carving itself, I really loved the idea of keeping it as one piece. Along the way, I had considered maybe cutting it up to make it easier to transport in a few different pieces, but when I looked at it initially, I got the idea of the river because the wood grain lines reminded me just a little bit of bathymetry, and so keeping it as one piece felt like a really appropriately fluid way to represent the river and the tree. Selecting the wood itself was a process. My uncle let me come into his wood shop, and that's not the right photo. There we go. Let me go to his wood shop and pick whatever piece I wanted, and I selected what I thought was a beautiful piece of black walnut. And I created the whole project, and I sent him a photo, so proud of what I'd made at the end, and he said, "Louise, that's great, but that is not black walnut. You shouldn't have put that in the program. It's black cherry." So my lesson started right away. but then I had to actually get the river onto the piece of wood. So I also forgot to take a before picture, so he sent me very kindly these photos of really similar planks of wood to what mine was. But in order to get the actual river feature onto the wood, I just from Pro printed out the same dimensions that my actual plank was of just the Mississippi River feature, and I just traced it with pencil and then over it with Sharpie so that it wouldn't come off during the carving process. And to get the more specific shape, I just hand drew freestyle boundaries around the river to get the rough shape around the river, and I used a mechanical handsaw to cut off the largest chunks to get it a little bit closer and tighter. And then to perfect and refine the shape, I did it all by hand with wood rasps and files, and then finally a couple of different grades of sandpaper to get it as smooth as I could. And this also was a whole process, and if I did it again, I would start earlier, take more time to sand out more of the imperfections, but I then had to get the actual river burned in, and so I used a wood burning pen that I had to take a few passes along the wood so that it was really dark and even. And finally, I wanted to keep as much of the natural color as possible because it is such a beautiful, like, red-brown color. And so I just finished it with natural beeswax and mineral oil, and then I set it to cure until it was dry. And that was really the whole process of creating it. I ran into a lot of issues, and there's a lot that I would do differently the next time, but I'm really glad that I took the plunge and I got out of my comfort zone and made something unique and different. And while I have exchanged the banks of the Mississippi for those of the Chattahoochee for the time being, I'm really happy that I created something that matters to me and hopefully shows a bit of my own gratitude to the places in the river that have shaped me along the way. And that's all I have. Oh my gosh, I can't get it out.
Awesome, thank you, Louise. Does anyone have any questions? If you raise your hand really high so we can see. Yes, okay.
How long did this whole process take, and would you do it again?
How long did it take, and what was the second thing you said?
Would you do it again?
Oh, I'd definitely do it again, yeah. I started it, I got the piece of wood in May, I believe, and I was moving at the time, and so I'd like started it and then would take breaks and start it again. I would say probably total, it took me 40 to 50 hours, but over like 4 months, so not that long, I don't know.
Any other questions right now? We can do maybe one more. Yeah.
What made you chose kind of just naturally carving out the buffer around the river versus using like an actual defined like distance to the river?
I did consider, and I actually did make like a few different buffer distances in Pro that I was going to trace. And then I decided, I don't know, all the woodworking that I've done in the past, I just kind of carve it as it feels right with the wood. And since it was a river, doing it more fluidly and kind of choosing my own boundaries felt right to me instead of having like a strict specific distance. I just wanted to do what I thought visually looked beautiful.
Awesome, thank you so much, Louise.
Thank you.